If you are lucky enough to have a pension, you're probably thinking, you know what, I've got it made. I don't have to worry about stock market returns. I don't have to worry about much of anything unless the pension system itself goes under, which hopefully that's not going to be the case for you. But there are things that if you do not focus on, it could literally wreck your entire retirement. In these scenarios I'm going to give you, these may be a little bit extreme and they probably won't be your situation because I know you're responsible with your dollars. You know exactly what to do. But as a former firefighter, I worked with guys and gals who really just didn't always care about their dough. And they were looking at different ways and different things to do. And some of them just were living life. They weren't saving extra dollars. They were solely just saying, you know what, I'm going to have a pension. So for those of you out there that are a little bit concerned, I'm going to paint a little bit of this picture of maybe why you should be concerned, or maybe in your scenario, you shouldn't be concerned because you've been responsible. So first, let's take a look at the first scenario. I'm going to give it to you here. It's going to be a pension with no COLA or cost of living adjustment. Now, again, I'd mentioned I was a firefighter. In 2012, I believe it was, Rick Scott came in to the state of Florida and said, hey, guess what, guys? We're going to have to cut from somewhere. So anybody that is on the Florida state retirement system, we're cutting their cost of living increases. That means that anybody started from then forward, we're actually going to be, not getting that cost of living adjustment. Now, things are starting to change around there when it comes to the state of Florida, and things are getting better for the Florida state retirement system. But there was a time where it was not that great. And so if you're looking at your pension, you may or may not have a cost of living adjustment or a cost of living increase. And so if you don't have that, you've got to start planning and saying, okay, am I going to be able to make it through retirement if I retire at, let's say 60 or 55? In my scenario specifically, I started young enough where I would have potentially been able to retire at age 45, but my cost of living increase would have been pennies. And being pennies means that it wouldn't have made it all the way until I needed to, supplement my income with Social Security. So I would have had to save a significant amount more or extend or really delay my retirement. So looking at this here, I'm going to make up a person, Bob the Builder and Mrs. Bob the Builder. Both are age 55. They're not good savers. They're just not great with their money. They've only planned to have a pension. They're like, you know what? I've got a pension. I'm going to be good for life. And so they've got $25,000 in cash, nothing else. They got $5,000 in monthly expenses. And then from there, that's roughly $60,000 before taxes is what it comes to. And their pension is going to be $45,000, or Bob's pension is going to be $45,000. They're both going to get Social Security. At 62, they get $1,800. So I'm going to take you to the slide here and show you exactly what I'm thinking here. And as you guessed it, 0% probability of success. But let's talk about why. Let's really look at this, because you may say, well, obviously they didn't save any extra money, but that's just not the full case here. In their scenario, if you're looking at this, you could see they're going to retire 56 years old. They've got $45,000 coming in of pension income. They're going to have a negative net flow. The reason for the negative net flow is obviously they need more money because they're spending more than they're making. But then if we scroll down here, we can actually see, or if we're looking down, we see that when the Social Security starts, they actually have a surplus of money coming in. Now, if they save the money, they'd be okay, and they would actually make it through the rest of their retirement years. The issue is going to be in the later years, though, because of the amount of inflation potentially that comes into play here. That's what's going to catch them and put them in a position where, again, they're going to have negative net flows later on. Now, if they save some money, they may be okay. But what you have to plan for is the unexpected when it comes to financial planning. And if you're not planning for potentially higher years of inflation and you don't have a cost of living increase or an adjustment on your pension, that's something that may catch you off guard there. So you definitely want to make sure of that one. Second one that I want to talk through is a windfall elimination provision. So what ends up happening is some people that are working and getting a pension are not going to have any Social Security. You're not paying into Social Security. You're only getting your pension. And again, we're going to go back to Bob and Mrs. Bob the Builder, both 55. This time they saved a little bit more. It's all in cash. They've got $150,000 in cash, $45,000 pension with a 3% cost of living increase. So now we've brought in the cost of living increase, but they've got no Social Security, only for Bob. The missus has $1,800 annually at age 62. Now, let's take a look at this scenario. So again, we have a 0% probability of success. But if we look at the cash flows and we start to break this down, we can see that, yes, there's negative cash flows and they're going to have some issues in the early years, but they've got $150,000 before Social Security comes in to offset that. The problem is in this scenario is that eventually the expenses just get the best of them. Once they get to the later years, that's going to allow or not allow them to continue to keep up. So again, you just have to make sure you know what you're getting into. Do you have Social Security? Have you been paying in? Because if not, and you didn't realize that, I wouldn't say it as much as for people with pensions, but I actually have talked to others. If you're a pastor or somebody like that, sometimes you can elect to not pay into Social Security. And oftentimes, if you haven't saved enough, I have seen some where they say, well, you know what? Maybe I should have just paid into the Social Security. Now, in these situations with a pension, you don't have that option for you. But then let's just take a look at a third one here. And this is probably one of the biggest threats to retirement. If you are married and filing jointly and you have your spouse and your spouse is going to get part of your pension, but they don't get the full pension, that's a real concern if you have not done the proper financial planning. So going back to Bob and Mrs. Bob the Builder, 55, $150,000 cash, $45,000 pension with a 3% COLA. Bob and the Mrs. both receive the $1,800 annually at 62. But the pension will decrease to 75% paid out if Bob passes early. And remember, Social Security is only going to pay out the highest of the two, which for them, they both get $1,800. And so in this scenario here, the missus isn't going to get anything. Well, guess what? If Bob lives to 90 and the missus lives to 90, they're the same age, everything's just cut and dry, they've got a 100% probability of success. Sure, there's not going to be any legacy that they can really leave. They've got $27,000 remaining, but you know what? They're enjoying life. Everything's going to be okay. But in the scenario where if Bob passes at age 75, that's not going to be the case whatsoever, because again, we can take a look and see here. The issue is, if we look at the cash flows, is that Bob's Social Security is going to go down, and the missus is going to have only 75% of that if he passes at 75. But not only that, now her Social Security is cut in half, and that means that she's not going to have enough money to make it the rest of the time. Now, these are just three random scenarios to get you to thinking if you have a pension, but I also want you to think through things that could happen, like the unexpected. So it's always a great idea, if you have a pension, to also be saving elsewhere, to not just count on the pension, because there are going to be things that happen. You are going to want to make sure that you have enough liquidity if you need to replace the roof or do anything else, maybe buy a new car. Maybe, you're strapped with the pension covering your basic necessities, but if the other things come up, you're going to want to have the money to take care of those. So that's just a few for you. If you got others, let me know in the comments. I'm sure you're probably thinking of some, so it would help others out as well.